Welcome to another episode of Player Profiler Primetime News. I'm Mike Lindberg, and today we're diving into the latest NFL news and fantasy football insights that you need to dominate your leagues. Joining me, as always, is my co-host Jeremiah Retzlaff, who brings a wealth of knowledge and sharp analysts to the table. We'll tackle injury updates for key players, discuss fantasy takeaways from the upcoming matchups, and share our bullish and bearish sentiments on players you should keep your eye on. So whether you're looking to make a strategic waiver wire move or just want to stay informed, we've got you covered. So let's get into this with our top stories. Let's go. Sam Darnold and the Minnesota Vikings invade Lambeau Field to push to 4-0 in Jordan Love's return from injury. Jer, what are the fantasy football takeaways from this game? Because there is a lot of them.
Well, first, Mike, I love this 6:45 start time. It is beautiful. I feel like a man in my 70s. I might just go get some prune juice right after this. So let's talk about Packers-Vikings. The Vikings invade Lambeau Field. They win 31-29. It was a game that had played like a blowout. The Vikings were up 28-7 at the half. The Packers managed 22 points in the fourth quarter, but a field goal late kept the distance far enough that the Packers' late scoring just made that game look closer than it really was. For Sam Darnold, 275 passing yards, 3 touchdowns passing, and 1 interception. So the question starts becoming, is J.J. McCarthy the guaranteed starter in 2025? For the Minnesota Vikings? Teams are about winning, and if the Vikings make the playoffs with Sam Darnold, and we don't see any sizable regression where Darnold turns back into seeing ghosts, then it is absolutely in the cards for Darnold to be the 2025 starting quarterback in Minnesota. Whether they pay him or not is another story. Let's go to Aaron Jones, 22 carries, 93 yards. He did not get a touchdown. I wanted to see him get a Lambeau leap, but Aaron Jones will happily take the victory. Justin Jefferson, 6 catches, 85 yards, 8 targets, and a touchdown. While Malik Nabers is climbing into elite territory for Dynasty wide receiver 1, J-Jets showed why he's at the top, just eviscerating and making Packers defenders look silly. That man has a family. Jordan Addison was a sneaky player to return. Just about an hour prior to the game, we got news Jair Alexander was declared out. The public immediately thinks, hey, this will benefit Justin Jefferson. However, Addison made his stamp on the game. 3 catches, 72 yards, a receiving touchdown, and he also had a rushing touchdown. So Jordan Addison, with the confidence now placed in Sam Darnold, makes him an easy player to fill your wide receiver 3 spot. Pivoting over to Green Bay. Sure, they lost, but they had a lot of fantasy goodness. Jordan Love, 32 of 54, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Love was not sharp in this game and amassed scoring via volume, and he did his best Brett Favre impression in some spots. Jaden Reed picked up from week 1, had 7 catches, 139 yards, and a touchdown on 8 targets. The War Daddy strikes again. Christian Watson got hurt with an ankle injury we'll speak to later. We will see how that impacts any truncating of the Packers' weaponry. Now, hint, hint, Dontavian Wicks, who was a best ball darling all offseason. You could get in the double-digit rounds, 5 catches, 78 yards, and 2 touchdowns, a team-high 13 targets. Now, Tucker Kraft, he was a sneaky play with Jordan Love coming back, under the radar. If you had to search the tight end waiver wire after Trey McBride got hurt, and it looked like Sam Laporta might miss, you were scraping. So there were a couple league mates in every league looking for tight ends to stream. Tucker Kraft gets 6 catches, 63 yards, a touchdown on 9 targets. He also caught a 2-point conversion to complete the octopus. So big ramifications from fantasy. There's a lot of fantasy goodness out of this game. A lot of good impressions. You're happy from a fantasy standpoint that the Packers are back and they're charged. You can starting just more than maybe Josh Jacobs and Jaden Reed. Then, of course, the Minnesota Vikings, you have confidence with Jordan Addison coming back. And then we're hearing that TJ Hawkinson should be good to go for week 7. What are your thoughts, Mike?
My thoughts is I was really, really happy to be able to pick up Tucker Kraft headed into the weekend because, when you got a guy like Evan Ingram and Trey McBride on your bench, you're scrambling to the waiver wire. And there was about 3 or 4 names out there that were floating around. And for me, I knew with Jordan Love coming back and how Tucker Kraft played last year at the end of the year, he just emerged past Luke Musgrave, in my opinion, and he is their go-to tight end. They mentioned on the news broadcast last night that Tucker Kraft was the backup tight end. To me, I don't know. A backup tight end does not, get 6 receptions, scoring a touchdown, 50 plus yardage. That guy is now the leader there in that room. And yeah, man, good on you there for leading the way there, Jeremiah. That game was electrifying. I think it was the game of the week. And it was important that both those teams had a strong showing. Jordan Love coming back and looking really, really fresh, in the second half, especially. Like he looked better than I thought he was going to look. Wicks coming in there, what a performance by him. And then, the Vikings, good on them for bracing that storm. Like they're a team that is probably up there with the Chiefs at this stage. There's not many other teams that could play on both sides of the ball, go into Lambeau Field, and did what they did. So Minnesota Vikings is a team to look out for here, folks. And we've got some bad news, and their injury bug has just been hitting the NFL, and it's no better this week. We've got some big names that are going to the injury spots here in our lineups, and it's unfortunate. Anthony Richardson being one of them. He taking a hit following his hip pointer injury, sustaining the Colts week 4 game against the Steelers. Although early reports suggest the injury isn't serious, Richardson struggles prior to the injury, failing to reach double-digit points in 2 consecutive games, have left fantasy gamers feeling very uneasy. He was forced to leave the game after that hard hit, only to return briefly before exiting the game again, with backup quarterback Joe Flacco finishing the game. It's notable that the receivers like Michael Pittman Jr. and Josh Downs had better performances under Flacco, raising concerns about Richardson's effectiveness moving forward. Jeremiah, what's your situation on this? I don't think they're going to be in a huge rush to get Richardson back after seeing what Flacco had done on the field there. He's a serviceable quarterback. He goes in and gets the win against the 3-0 Steelers, who are a formidable team. And what are your thoughts now leading up to here?
So I think they don't have to rush Anthony Richardson. We will see what the value is, what's actionable for us as fantasy gamers. Joe Flacco, if you apply the any quarterback on a 53 roster strategy where you're just hoarding backup quarterbacks for the opportunity to sell, you have to make sure that you have the dynasty discipline to sell when the opportunity presents itself. Right now, I would float out Joe Flacco for a third. And if it turns into there's going to be a multi-week injury, you may have an opportunity at some point to squeeze for a second, but you don't want to necessarily get greedy. Do you have the dynasty discipline to ride the wave of a Flacco game or two and then sell him when you can? Granted, that's if there's a pending longer injury for Anthony Richardson. Now, with the weapons, ironically, Michael Pittman becomes a lot more viable with Joe Flacco. And with Josh Downs, it's all upside with him. There's no downside on Josh Downs. So I actually prefer for the weaponry, for the receivers, to have Joe Flacco, a lot like we saw with the Cleveland Browns last year. So that's my mixed take on it. I think Anthony Richardson can come back and apply that rushing upside. But Mike, can you tell us about Rashee Rice and his possible ACL injury?
I don't really want to have to tell you about it, but this injury looks worse than it may have been initially reported after the game. But you know what? We're hearing mixed reviews. I'm hearing it's severe. I'm hearing it's not. So we're just going to have to wait and see until after the tests come back. But he sustained a serious knee injury. It's no doubt about that in week 4 victory against the Chargers. Initially feared to be a simple sprain, reports indicate it could be a torn ACL, which would be the worst case scenario and potentially end his season. Rice was carted off with the knee brace. Andy Reid expressed the lack of optimism regarding the diagnosis. This is a devastating blow for Rice and fantasy gamers and my beloved Chiefs. Their leading receiver, 24 catches, 288 yards, and 2 touchdowns, will likely be missing a large amount of time. We saw guys fill in the lineup like Sky Moore, who couldn't catch a ball for the hell of them. It's not looking good right now. Travis Kelce uh, probably didn't want to be needed this earlier in the season, and now he's going to be probably forced into action. It looks like the Chiefs are expressing interest in other wide receivers. I heard a rumor this morning about Amari Cooper being potentially a guy that is on the market. That would be a very interesting fit for the Chiefs, a rental property there. And yeah, I would love to see the fit there because similar skill set to Rashee Rice, I could see him being a very valuable tool for the Chiefs if they can manage to snag that one.
And I like what you say. All the closing line value best ball bros pour some out for now. Hopefully we get some good news on Rashee Rice. But to your point with chasing after Amari Cooper is a very much a spike week player. I think he would be viable every week with Patrick Mahomes. You would have a lot more confidence plugging him into the lineup. I think you make a key good point about the PPR goodness between Rashee Rice and Amari Cooper. Now, Mike, can you tell us about Jonathan Taylor? Suffers a high ankle sprain. Most running backs, they typically miss at least 1 week, and the severity is to be determined. What's your read and take on what fantasy gamers should do?
Oh, yeah, I know. Late in the fourth quarter, the Colts game against the Steelers, Taylor came up limping after a short run and was eventually ruled questionable to return. Initial reports suggesting it is a high ankle sprain, like you mentioned, Jeremiah, after a pretty good game, rushing 21 times, 88 yards. His status now leaves fantasy gamers in a very tough spot that are awaiting further updates. If Taylor is forced to miss time, which likely is, high ankle sprains are nothing to be, scoffing about. Running backs tend to have a little bit better of a recovery time because they're not needed as bad with that ankle. But at the same time, high ankle sprains can be severe depending on the severity of it. So Trey Sermon will likely see an increased workload for the Colts backfield. Sermon could become a solid option for fantasy gamers seeking a running back depth in Taylor's absence. The Colts have shown they could utilize him effectively in their running game, especially with Anthony Richardson's playmaking ability. If both Taylor and Richardson were to miss time, I think Sermon would be a viable play because we saw what Joe Flacco did there. He puts a little bit more of a spark in that offense, making it a little bit more in depth in the red zone type scenario. So we could see a spike there for Trey Sermon, and interesting scenario still with those Colts. It's a tough one. Both their run game could be affected, but they could be playing catch up, and a very good situation for a guy like Josh Downs, and maybe a resurgence of Michael Pittman, like you mentioned earlier in the segment.
And of note, it is a very juicy matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 5. So hopefully JT can suit up and be there. How about Christian Watson? We were talking about the Packers earlier, all the goodness between Wicks, Reed, leaning towards 2 to 4 weeks being out. Not good news there. Mike, what's your take on Christian Watson being out?
Well, he injured himself in the first quarter. He seems like he just can't catch a break. Watson is a guy that just, with his hamstrings the last couple of years, we had high hopes, especially with how much potential Jordan Love has in that offense. And it's just unfortunate. It brings in, opportunity when absence happens, opportunity for guys like Tavian Wicks and Romeo Dobbs, both of whom could see an uptick in targets as the quarterback Jordan Love looks for reliable options. Wicks is the guy I've had my eyes circled on in the preseason. I went on record in one of my podcasts. I had him going up against, Romeo Dobbs, and I was fighting with Debro on that. And you know what? I said talent's going to rise above, and I think that's what's happening. Wicks has shown potential. He has a 23% targets per route run, a 2.31 yards per route run, indicating his ability to create separation and find open space as the Packers prepare for a matchup against the vulnerable LA Rams secondary in week 5. Wicks could easily emerge as a top option in fantasy lineups with their buys approaching. Adding Wicks now could provide crucial depth. His rising involvement suggests he could finish among the top 30 wide receivers in fantasy points during Watson's absence, and he could emerge as a guy that's going to just stick in that offense, even if Watson does come back, because his talent is proven that. Now, Tucker Kraft also emerging as a key target in that offense. We talked about that earlier. 6 catches, 53 yards, and a touchdown. Kraft is also becoming increasingly involved, and it just looks like this offense is starting to gel. And with Jordan Love back, I'm excited to see what potential is here. And we know that they have a lot of guys that can come in and plug and play on a weekly basis, and that's what's happening again this year with the injury bug at full loom in Green Bay.
Now, Mike, we have Malik Neighbors with his concussion. Average recovery time is 8 days. There's a slight chance he'll play in week 5. One thing that I'm of the understanding is that you have longer time to recover. Time just really does help. Malik Neighbors has that extra time from playing on Thursday heading into week 5. What's your take on Malik Neighbors possibly playing in week 5?
I think it's going to be tough, but he is saying he is all good. It will be challenging for him to pass through the protocol, but like you said, he's got the extra time. So that has happened last year a couple times where guys on the bubble were, projected not to start, ended up getting in the game. So this is going to be one that's going to come down to a game time decision, in my opinion, as far as like passing through protocol. It'll be a last minute thing. His absence, if it does happen, will open up the door for Wan'Dale Robinson. And I'm going to talk about him a little bit more in my bullish bearish segment here. So yeah, not looking great for Malik Neighbors availability, but I mean, man, what a seasons he's had, and we know we're both pretty bullish on him leading into the season. And wow, what a performance it's been.
Well, Mike, what an injury roundup. And you go through week after week, you're just trying to find out how could we nail, predict, understand, just see it coming, be proactive, preemptive. What can we do to understand injuries better? I think the Podfather has something for us.
Hey, you're in your fantasy draft and someone says, hey, that guy's injury prone, I don't want him. And you're like, I don't know, I don't think you can predict injuries. Well, guess what? Now you can! Injury proneness is real! At Player Profiler, we have the data on these players, and it's all in the Injury Finder app. Their injury track record back through time, exactly where they were injured, how severe it is. We look at the BMI data, and we crunch it all together, and we give you probabilities that a player will miss multiple games this NFL season, as well as the complete database of NFL injuries and the ability to compare two players and look at their injury track record. The Injury Finder is powerful, and it's only $5. If it's worth it to have that peace of mind when you're drafting, go get it.
Man, that Injury Finder, it is just going off. Like, it's been going off all season. I'm glad I have it in my arsenal because it was helping me avoid a couple key injuries. And yeah, let's move on to Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles, and they're in trouble as they fall to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in a game that most people thought that the Eagles would look a lot better in. Maybe not winning the game, but wow. Holy smokes, 33-16, Jeremiah. Why don't you dive into that one and see and tell our viewers kind of like what you thought about it and what do you think about the Eagles moving forward?
Well, this was a game that was supposed to be, it was under 3 for the spread. So let's start with the bad. The Jalen Hurts-led Eagles did not do well on Sunday in Tampa Bay. They were banged up without A.J. Brown, Devonta Smith. So it was difficult for Jalen Hurts to get anything going offensively. Down 14-0 after one quarter. The pressure was on early. Jalen Hurts had a pedestrian 158 yards passing and 1 touchdown pass to, wait for it, Paris Campbell. Talk about a deep cut. I can remember the Podfather podcast hyping up Paris Campbell years ago. I remember going on walks and just hearing about, oh, Paris Campbell will return this week. It'll happen this week. Pour some out for what his career could have been. Hurts had 2 fumbles and he lost 1. Hurts is hurting his fantasy managers with performances like this. From weeks 1 through 3, he was QB 10, 2, and 24, respectively. Heading into the games tonight, Hurts is the QB 11 on the week with 16.32 fantasy points, and this is counting for 4-point passing touchdowns. Saquon Barkley, RB 17 on the week so far with 13.6 fantasy points. He had 84 yards rushing on 10 carries. That seems criminal that he only got 10 carries with such a void in the lineup. He had a long run of 59 yards. So yes, that one 59-yarder counts, but the rest of the day was inefficient. Barkley had 2 catches for 32 yards. Barkley did not look like the 2025 101 pick for next year with this performance. Dallas Goedert, a decent 7 catches for 62 yards. Surely he's helping you out at the tight end position. Big change in the switch from running back to what's good for running back, what's good for tight end. Into tonight's game, Goddard is tight end 6 with 13.2 points. So a huge difference between the positional value there. My impression of the Eagles is that they're a team that hasn't had a normal week when we zoom out, full stock of their fantasy relevant players. Week 1 was on horrible turf in Brazil. A week 5 bye lets the Eagles get fully rested. While Jalen Hurts has looked out of focus, lackluster, unaware, lethargic, there is something about having his full stable around him in week 6 onward. The next 6 opponents are the Browns at home, Giants on the road, Bengals away, Jags at home, Cowboys away, Commanders at home. I would buy low on Hurts if people are panicking. Turn to the Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield. Now something good. Threw for 347 yards and 2 touchdowns. Baker continues to be someone that you just can't ignore. Into tonight, Baker is QB3 for week 4, 28.88 points in 4-point passing leagues. Now let's get to Bucky Irving, Rashad White. They had 10 carries each with an identical 49 yards rushing, but Bucky Irving got the goal line touchdown. Bucky Irving fans are pulling ahead at the moment versus the Rashad White stands. So stay tuned, but this feels like an imminent takeover. When you add in the combine testing metrics that Bucky Irving had, it's tempting to throw the Kyren Williams comparisons out there, as Kyren didn't have a strong combine. Now pivot over. Mike Evans, ever durable, 8 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown on 14 targets. He's in your lineup every week. You can't bench him. Mike Evans is wide receiver 5 in week 4 with 23.4 points. And if you hear about, oh, the Chiefs could trade for Mike Evans, hold the phone. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are competitive. They're not selling anytime soon. Now Chris Godwin, 6 catches, 69 yards, 9 targets. Excellent game. You're still starting him. Shout out to Bradley Stalder. All right, this one's for you, Bradley. Sterling Shepard had 3 catches, 51 yards. Now we know the problem for Shepard is his inability to stay healthy. Truly an injury-prone player. Talking about the injury finder, you know, we could have Sterling Shepard right on there. But I would say, buy Bucky Irving. Hold or sell Rashad White. Buy Mike Evans on a contending dynasty team. And buy Chris Godwin in all formats. Now, everyone, before we go to the next injury segment, if you're enjoying the show, don't miss out on more exclusive content. Subscribe to Player Profiler YouTube channel at Player Profiler News. Follow us on X at Profiler_NFL and visit playerprofiler.com/news for all the latest breaking news and its impact on fantasy football. Stay ahead of the game with Player Profiler. Now, Mike, for expected returns, we talk about injuries. Well, where's the relief going to happen for us? Can you start us off with A.J. Brown? He's got his hamstring injury. What's the word on him? And Devonta Smith with the concussion.
Yeah, let's do some quick hitters here, Jeremiah. AJ Brown is dealing with that hamstring issue, but is on track to return after the Eagles week 5 bye. When healthy, we know he's the key part of their Eagles passing attack. And Jalen Hurts, we know he needs him back big time. His production went down big time this last week. I think that had a lot to do with missing his two best weapons. Smith also dealing with a concussion here. He's expected to benefit from the week 5 bye for recovery. His return alongside Brown will strengthen the Eagles receiving core, making both receivers must-start options moving forward. Now we're going to move on to Joe Mixon, who also is nursing an ankle injury. Now, data suggests he's got a 2 out of 3 chance of him playing in week 5. If he can go, he'll be a crucial component of the Texans offense. There was speculation that he would start this week, so I'm assuming he's back in, uniform this weekend when the Texans play. So moving on to Trey McBride, who, like many of us thought that he might have an opportunity to play this week, but that concussion did leave him out of that situation. And, that game was a little less dramatic than many of us thought it would be. I think Jaden Daniels lived up to his end of the bargain, but Kyler Murray did not. I think Trey McBride missing that game might have had a very big outcome because of that. Now, Jeremiah, what do you think about that situation there? I mean, in a game that Kyler Murray should have just gone off on, and many people had him set up as a top 5 quarterback this week. Just disappointment all throughout that game for Kyler Murray and that offense in general against that Commanders defense that was giving up a ton of points.
I think the issue back-to-back weeks, we've had just the disappointment with the game against the Lions and then, of course, the game against the Commanders. The Cardinals have not held their end of the fantasy football shootout as far as that bargain. They've not been there. A big part of that is the fact that they've been run on so well between Montgomery, Gibbs, and then this week, it was very easy to tell from far away. Brian Robinson Jr., especially with Austin Eckler out, would have a wonderful game. So on the ground in totality with McNichols, Jaden Daniels himself, and then Brian Robinson Jr., they just went off. So the Cardinals are actually in this spot where, hey, they get the 49ers next week. So that's just going to be all Jordan Mason. It's going to be tough sledding for them. So as far as game flow in shootouts early in the season, you just think the Cardinals could be a stereotypical just shootout team, and they're not. They sorely need Trey McBride back. And for some reason, they go away from Marvin Harrison Jr. after the first quarter. It's just the oddest thing. Hopefully there's just some regression there. Now, pivoting over to their division league mates, who they put a stomping on a couple weeks ago, so it doesn't make much sense right now how the Cardinals are playing. But Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp with their injury recovery. What do you got for us on Kupp and Nacua?
Well, you know what? This situation, the Rams definitely need some reinforcements. They did not look good this week, and we saw that evident, after the game plan the week before. Kyren Williams, obviously he did produce this week, but it wasn't to the prolific numbers he did the week before. So there was an effort there to stop him. Now, Puka Nacua is expected to be out around the 6-week mark, so potentially returning around week 7 and 8. His absence has been significant. Cooper Kupp, they already said that he's not going to be playing this upcoming week, so we might have to wait another week or two, probably around week 7 or 8 again for Cooper Kupp. Now, some interesting news now. People coming back to practice, Jeremiah. This is a very encouraging sign considering how lengthy our injury list has been. And we'll get to this start and sit question right away, this trade question. Yeah. After I just kind of quickly go through Jonathan Brooks. Brooks is leaning towards a return in probably week 6 is my guess. They're going to be bringing him back to practice. His window is open now. TJ Hawkinson, his expected timeline is around week 7 to 9. He is back to practice this week, so we're going to have to watch that intently. They may not be in too much of a hurry to bring him back. They might ease him in the way because they're 4-0 at this stage. Maybe if they were 2-2, that situation might be a little bit more urgent. That big win in Green Bay, that it gives them a 2-game lead on the next opponent in that division. So I think that maybe they wait another week or two to save Hawkinson in action there. And then the last one here, fantasy gamers are really looking forward to seeing Nick Chubb back just for sentimental purposes. But as a person, Nick Chubb is, what a great player he's been in it. And, we only want to see him back. His 4-week ramp up is starting now. So hopefully we see him back in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Nick Chubb would be a huge addition. Now, we got a trade question here. Should I trade Trey McBride for CMC and Bowers in one PPR? Now, this one here is like, there's a lot of layers of complexity to this one. I like what I see in Bowers. I think it's a very even trade at that stage. This whole CMC tendonitis situation, Bradley Stalder made a pretty funny joke on our private chat there. He mentioned that is tendonitis contagious because all of a sudden it spread to his second leg, and apparently it was always there. Not too sure about that situation. It just came about an hour ago. It came across my desk that news that CMC has got tendonitis in both legs. So that is a very concerning situation. So I'm assuming this is a redraft question here. And if it is, Jeremiah, why don't you break that down for us? And then maybe I'll give you my insight after.
So we can talk about with redraft, it's such a illiquid market. It's very difficult to swing and finesse a trade in redraft. I would, if I'm the Trey McBride person and I'm 1-3 and I need to make a upside down the line, things line up for you as well, move 1-for-1 swap. I think you go pull in Bowers and see Bowers. You got to tell a story, right? Bowers and McBride as lock and lock, 1-for-1, and you get down the road next week to 2-3, and of course build off of that. And you tell yourself a story that in taking CMC, you push to his return so that you're just strengthening your team as you get CMC back. So sometimes what happens is when you're down to 0-4, you're at 1-3, you have to do a little more of a desperation move where you'll either immediately sink or you'll just start to swim. And there's really no in between at this point. So if you're in that pocket where you're a little lower and desperate, I think you pull the trigger. If you're from a point of strength and you're looking at your depth and you feel like you have full depth everywhere, and your 1-to-1 player take, you like Trey McBride more, I could see you just laying off on that. But at the same time, the idea of getting CMC late in the season to put you over the top, it's a little less. I wouldn't necessarily do it in that spot, but I would definitely consider and lean more towards you're on the 0-1 or 0-4, 1-3 side. What do you say to that, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. I think it just really depends on what your situation is as far as record goes, and if you need to make this move. If I'm a contender right now and I see myself having Trey McBride, someone wants to give me some CMC and Bowers love, I think that's a pretty immediate yes for me, because CMC is going to put your team over the edge. Bowers is getting just as many looks as Trey McBride is, and maybe they look at giving Aiden O'Connell a little bit more of a look moving forward eventually too, who might be a better situation for these pass catchers. Devontae Adams being out too has hurt Bowers a bit. I think takes a bit of that the coverage away. So yeah, crazy question there, and I think it was well answered by you, Jeremiah. So let's get into the bullish bearish segment, my man, and let's get your take on bullish bearish.
0-1. Come on.
So every week we go bullish, we go bearish. I really wanted to go bullish on somebody this week, but I draw bearish, and it's fun. You're pivoting, taking the different stance. It's so easy to be bullish, but to go against the market and go against sentiment and be bearish, it can take a little bit more energy and charge, conviction, right? But this one, markets are up, markets are down, sentiments are fluid and always changing. I'm a little concerned on Travis Etienne. I feel like the public may be with me on this. Travis Etienne, 34th in receiving yards, 32nd in yards per reception, 37th in yards per touch, 49th in juke rate, and 21st in rushing yards. Heading into week 4, Etienne was RB22. Etienne Sunday against the Texans had 1 catch for 10 yards off 2 targets and had a meager 11 carries for 50 yards. So that's kind of like the split of Bucky Irving and Rachaad White. His backfield mate, Tank Bigsby, 7 carries for 90 yards, and from an eye test standpoint, had the juice. It did look like Etienne had a shoulder issue during the game, but it has been a calamitous showing so far. Weeks 1 through 3 in fantasy, 11.9, 14.8, and 12.5 points respectively, which ranked 28th, 20th, and 21st respectively. 7 points in week 4 against the Texans. That's in PPR. Etienne is RB35 heading into tonight's games. So chances are more than one running back tonight will score more than 7 fantasy points. Mike, overall right now, a quarter way through the season, I am bearish on the Jacksonville Jaguars overall, and that may be affecting this some, but I'm bearish on Travis Etienne. What do you think?
Yeah, it's a tough situation. Actually, I was a little bit more optimistic on what I saw from the offense this week in general, from the Jaguars. I mean, they looked pretty more on par with what we've been accustomed to. Trevor Lawrence looked a little bit better. I'm a little bit more optimistic. I didn't like to see the split that I saw with Tank Bigsby. I think some of that had to do with earlier in the game. It looked like Travis Etienne had been banged up earlier in that game, and he was questionable to return. So that might have played into some of that early usage. And when you get a guy going like Tank, maybe that's what posed the increased usage. And then once Etienne got back in the game, we saw a little bit more of his normal usage. So I'm not panicking yet, but it's definitely more of a split backfield. Many people maybe predicted this ahead of last year, and maybe Tank just wasn't living up to the expectation. And a year removed from that, a little bit more experience in that lineup, it's going to be maybe more of a 60-40 split, and going with the hot hand on busier weeks. So as long as it gets Trevor Lawrence back on track, I don't care what happens. And Brian Thomas Jr. looked awesome in that game.
Now, Mike, enough with the bad news. Can you give us some good news, some bullish news?
Well, I don't know if it's bullish, but it's a player that I'm bullish on because, he's going under the radar in a lot of leagues, and that's Wan'Dale Robinson. While Malik Neighbors has been grabbing the headlines with his impressive stats, it's Robinson who's been making a compelling case for fantasy relevance. After an explosive performance on national television, I'm feeling bullish about him and his potential as a starter moving forward. Robinson showcased his talent against the Cowboys, catching 11 passes on 14 targets for 71 yards, scoring 18 fantasy points. The kind of production is no fluke. He's been consistent. He's had over 30 targets to start the year. And what makes Robinson especially intriguing is his versatility and connection with quarterback Daniel Jones. As the Giants slot receiver, he thrives on short, quick routes, making him a reliable target in critical situations. His average depth of target might not be too high, but his ability to rack up receptions translates steady into fantasy points, the kind of safe floor that makes him appealing option in PPR formats. So he's a guy that I had on my radar as a week 1 waiver wire pickup, and he's been on my roster, and I've been able to use him in flex positions, and he paid off in dividends this week with how many injuries I had moving into the weekend. So Wan'Dale Robinson was a savior this week for me.
Hey, the PPR scam is back. It's alive and well, and it's there with Wan'Dale Robinson. So, Mike, no time like the present. Let's get into the coach's corner and the chef's table. All right, so coach over here, I'm going to cook up something on the Detroit Lions. Let's start with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Brown is second in targets with 33, seventh in target share, 32%, fifth in target rate, second in snap share, seventh in slot snaps with 90. Amon-Ra has 100% route participation. Amon-Ra is third in receptions with 21, sixth in fantasy EPA, 21.8, third in red zone targets with 5. He has that dog in him, and Amon-Ra has that touchdown dance to prove it. Week 1 was a blip on the radar. Amon-Ra is the alpha in this receiving room. Expect more of it to continue tonight. Jameson Williams, wide receiver 20 on the season, without counting, of course, week 4 so far in progress. After 24.4 points, which was 5th at the wide receiver position in week 1, it has dropped down to 14.4 in week 2 and then 1.2 in week 3. Jameson Williams, and this is totally fair to say, is a better and best ball player. He is somewhere between the paltry showing in week 3 and his big week 1 showing. The problem is judging that consistency. Of course, the boom weeks, you want him in your lineup, but good luck guessing. So is this early Gabe Davis? Jahmyr Gibbs, RB20 so far from weeks 1 through 3. Gibbs went 17.4, 17.6, and 16.3 for fantasy points. The big winning week hasn't happened yet. If you were to ask someone if they were to be happy, their 1-2 turn pick was producing RB20 numbers, they'd be disappointed. The problem for Gibbs, he has a 53.6% snap share, which is 29th for running backs. Opportunity share, 46.9%, 33rd. That's a problem. However, the bullish case remains that Gibbs can gain more backfield share and push into those 25 and 30-point PPR games. Tonight would be a great night for that to start. Take David Montgomery, RB18 on the season. It is night and day that you're happy with David Montgomery versus if you have Jahmyr Gibbs. Demont is matching the expectations of his ADP, so any upside is felt as profit, whereas with Gibbs, you were drafting him at his ceiling. Demont has the touchdown in all 3 games, and in 3 weeks, he scored 16.3, 17 points, and 21.2 fantasy points. So he has 2 top 12 RB weeks already. I expect him to score a touchdown tonight as I trust Montgomery tight at the goal line. Go to Jared Goff, QB29 on the season, 12th in interceptable passes with 4, 22nd in passing touchdowns with 3. This can regress favorably to help Goff rise. He's number 1 in accuracy rating versus man coverage. Look for Goff to take advantage of more one-to-one matchups in order to dig out of this rut. Part of why Goff hasn't had to do much in the passing game is that the Lions have run so well. Big night tonight for Jared Goff. And Laporta carted off last week. We were scared. Tight end 26 on the year so far. This can change quickly. Laporta is just the George Kittle on the Lions. Amon-Ra, Jamo, and Gibbs, Montgomery, that backfield make Laporta just a nice luxury. I expect tonight Jared Goff to find a touchdown with Sam Laporta. Laporta scores a touchdown tonight. Goff digs his way from QB29 with 275 passing yards and 3 touchdowns. Mike, what do you got for me on the other side?
Well, the other side of the ball really has to do with the Seahawks passing attack, and they boast one of the most talented receiving cores in the NFL, featuring DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and JSN. Each player has had their moments of brilliance this season, combining for 300-yard games already. However, the passing game has struggled due to inconsistent pass protection, with a PFF passing grade of just 53. Quarterback Geno Smith has faced significant pressure, which could hinder his ability to find his dynamic receivers consistently. Despite his struggles under pressure, Smith has shown resilience, completing 82% of his passes given a clean pocket. However, the Lions' defensive line generating significant pressure, Smith may find himself scrambling more than he'd like. The Lions' pass rush has been effective with strong success rate, which means Smith will need to make quick decisions. So, who is the wide receiver I'm looking on for the Seahawks to lean on? And that would be JSN this night because of the quick pressure that he's going to have to deal with in Geno Smith. And I think JSN is going to be the safety blanket. The Lions pass defense on the other side of the field has proven to be a formidable pass defense, ranking well among some of the toughest opponents. They have succeeded at generating pressure while maintaining a decent coverage metrics. Jared Goff, we know, can play well, but he's had a bad start to the season. Jeremiah touched base on the Lions, but the kicker here, the joker, if you will, is that the return of Kenneth Walker. The Seahawks need him, and it's an anticipated return. It adds intrigue, but the Seahawks rushing attack has been inconsistent, averaging just 3.9 yards per carry. While Walker's talent is undeniable, it's going to be tough sledding against this really, really tough Lions defense, but it's a good situation. Walker's returning. It's going to be a very, very close game, in my opinion, and I'm excited to see what happens in this one. Who do you got winning this game there, Jeremiah?
Oh, since I talked about them, the Lions are going to win. Take them on the money line. Let's go. How about you?
Yeah, let's. You know what? I'm going to go on the other side of the ball there. I think the Seahawks have got this one. The Lions have been struggling, and I just think that what I saw with the Seahawks is going to be fun. All right, what do you do? How do you feel about Christian Kirk? I feel great about Christian Kirk after the last two games without Evan Ingram, and without a hamstring there with Evan Ingram. We're not sure what's going to happen there. Those injuries tend to linger. Trevor Lawrence has looked really good the last game. Not really good, a lot better. So I would say that Christian Kirk, I feel pretty good about, especially in the short term here. What about you, Jeremiah?
Well, if you look at and I answered part of the strategy in the comments as well, but Kirk still has a good rapport with Trevor Lawrence. Problem is, BTJ is the truth. I would love if the Jaguars tank for Kirk to get traded away. In Dynasty, it's hard to get full price for Christian Kirk right now. No one's going to pay you the value price. You're better off holding and getting that value for Christian Kirk. But look at the next few games. They have a juicy matchup against the Colts. Put them in your lineup. The Bears, you can make a little bit more of an argument on the road. That's a tougher defense. With the Patriots, I would expect Christian Gonzalez to lock up on BTJ. So that might be another perfect underneath opportunity for Christian Kirk. And then the Green Bay Packers, we saw what Addison and Jefferson did. Granted, it's different talent tiers. I like a lot of what the Jaguars have coming up as far as it relates to Christian Kirk. So at this point, better to hold, be selective in your matchups. But it looks like 3 of the 4 matchups are good for Christian Kirk, especially in PPR leagues.
Yeah, he's going to be a guy you could ride even in Dynasty. He's still pretty young. He's got that contract, and he's tied to Trevor Lawrence, who's young as well. And the Jaguars are tied to him. They just signed him long term. So, Christian Kirk is going to be viable. Like, he may not have the most upside as far as trade value, but he's going to be a guy you can use in your flex for the next 3 years in a Dynasty league. And I'm okay with that, honestly. If he's getting 7 to 9 targets a game, that is playable, and if you really want to sell him, you can offload him after he has one of those spike games. But I honestly, those type of players are very valuable in your lineup week in and week out. Those high floor kind of plays, and he's a guy that is rarely injured as well too.
And also, he's not going to be a market moving player, but you speak to such the good, consistent value and fantasy goodness where at an older age 27, you might as well just keep him on your team for the duration. So long as you're contending, just ride out the guy's career. Sometimes, it's okay to hold a bag so long as the bag isn't going to be heavy. Holding on to Christian Kirk is not like, hey, you should have sold Travis Kelce last year, when you didn't know when they would ring the bell at the top. So absolutely keep hold on to Christian Kirk, especially in Dynasty, and have faith these next few games that he'll do well with these next 3 out of 4 games. I think they're good matchups. Plug them in for your PPR leagues, especially. Mike, any last words for us?
Yeah, for me, I just want to add one more thing as far as Dynasty goes, and just attacking wide receivers there. Like, Like those are the guys like you want to ride out wide receivers in dynasty until they go down. You know what I mean? Because they're not going to get that trade value. And guys that I'm offloading earlier, like a year before they go off, is the running backs. You know, like a year before their age clip happens, those are the guys you're trying to get rid of. And I'm riding out wide receivers to the end. So dump running backs early and keep those wide receivers late. So that's all I got. What
Hey,
another, yeah, 25% of the season is now complete after tonight, and you know, for fantasy gamers, a lot of us are in the thick of it. But you got to understand that there's probably very few 4-0 teams right now with the way the injuries are happening right now, and stay with it, stay the course, folks. What a great show, Jeremiah! Bring us home, my man.
A quarter of the way down. Run the race with endurance. We've got a whole lot more left. A lot's going to happen even tonight. And then, of course, throughout the week, we get all these injury reports. So many moves that can still be made. Do not give up if you're 0-4, 1-3. Just make more dangerous moves at this point in the game. If you're 3-1, 4-0, look at those weaker teams and see if you can take advantage on the other side. Something's got to give. Something's got to break. Something will end up happening divergent in your leagues. But you might as well participate. Be a part of it. Be active in your waiver wire, trade markets, anything. Just go out, whether you're going to win or lose. Go out and go hard. And with that said, we will see you next week.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com, Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, data analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.